The sound of forks clinking against china echoed through the dining room, the kind of uneasy silence that made even the walls seem to listen. I sat at the far end of the table, trying not to draw attention to myself. My father's voice filled the air occasionally, deep and commanding, as he discussed my sister's husband, Daniel, the family's new golden son. Daniel had only been married to my sister, Claire, for 2 months, and already he was treated like royalty. Mom beamed whenever he spoke, laughing at his dull jokes as if he were some kind of celebrity. I stayed quiet, focusing on the barely warm soup in front of me, pretending I didn't notice how my chair felt further and further away from the table with every passing day. Then it happened. My father set his spoon down with a deliberate clang, his eyes cutting through me like a blade. "Listen, Emily," he began, his tone carrying a heavy finality. "We need to make some changes around here." Something inside me tensed. The way he said we already sounded like you're not part of this we anymore. He leaned back in his chair. "We don't have room for you anymore. Pack tonight. Your sister's husband will be moving into your room." For a second, I thought I'd misheard him. My hand froze midair, the spoon trembling slightly. "What?" My voice barely made a sound. He didn't blink. "You heard me. Daniel's going to start a home office, and he needs space. You've been here long enough. You're old enough to figure out your life." Claire stared at her plate, silent. Daniel cleared his throat and avoided eye contact. Mom said nothing, not even a whisper of protest. That silence, that was the real betrayal. I swallowed hard, my heart thudding against my ribs. I wanted to scream, to ask if they'd forgotten the nights I worked late shifts just to help pay our bills or the mornings I skipped breakfast so they could eat. But my words stuck in my throat. Dad pushed back his chair and stood up. "You can take your things tonight. I don't want a scene." And just like that, he walked away. Mom stood too, smoothing her apron as if this was all routine. "You know how your father is," she murmured, not meeting my eyes. "Just do what he says, don't make it harder." Claire finally looked at me, her expression unreadable. "It's not personal, Emily. You'll understand someday." I wanted to laugh. "Not personal? How do you kick out your own daughter and call it not personal?" When they left the table, I sat alone for what felt like hours. The lights flickered slightly, or maybe that was my vision blurring. I stared at the chipped plate in front of me and thought about every moment I'd tried to earn their love. Every thank you that never came. Every sacrifice that went unnoticed. Later that night, I packed quietly, a single suitcase, some clothes, an old laptop, and the few books that had kept me company when loneliness became unbearable. When I opened my drawer, I found a crumpled birthday card from years ago. The last one my father had ever signed for me. The words "We're proud of you" seemed to mock me now. I tore it in half and left it on the table. I looked around the room one last time, the same room where I'd cried, dreamed, and convinced myself that maybe one day they'd see my worth. Now, it was going to belong to the man who had known me for barely 3 months. As I stepped outside, the air was cold and sharp. The streetlights glowed dimly through the fog, and the sound of a barking dog echoed somewhere far away. I stood at the end of the driveway with my suitcase, not turning back even once. No goodbyes, no tears left to cry, just the bitter taste of freedom forced upon me. I walked until my legs ached, my heart hollow, but my mind slowly awakening. Each step away from that house felt like peeling away the layers of someone I no longer needed to be. The obedient daughter, the invisible sister, the unappreciated helper. By the time I reached the small park 2 streets over, I sat on a bench and looked at the pale moon hanging in the sky. My hands trembled as I pulled out my wallet. Everything I had left, $270, a bus card, and a folded piece of paper with an address from a job listing I'd seen weeks ago. It wasn't much, but it was mine. For the first time, I whispered into the night. They threw me away. But they'll remember my name one day. The wind rustled the leaves, almost as if it had heard my promise. And deep inside, beneath all the hurt, something fierce began to stir. The first spark of a revenge I didn't yet understand. The first morning after being kicked out was the coldest I'd ever felt, not just in my body, but deep in my bones. I woke up on a park bench with my jacket pulled tightly around me, dew soaking the edges of my hair. My phone was nearly dead, and so was my will to move. For a while I just sat there watching people rush to their jobs, their homes, their lives, everything I no longer had. When I finally stood up, I looked down the street and saw a small bakery with its lights glowing warmly through the fog. The smell of bread drifted toward me like an invitation. My stomach growled. I walked in quietly, my suitcase trailing behind me. The woman behind the counter looked up and smiled, the kind of genuine smile I hadn't seen in years. "Rough morning?" she asked kindly. I hesitated before answering. "Rough life, maybe." She chuckled softly, sliding a small muffin across the counter. "On the house." I blinked, surprised. "Why? Because you look like someone who needs to remember kindness still exists." Her words nearly broke me. I nodded quickly, swallowing back tears. I sat in the corner and ate slowly, savoring each bite. It wasn't just food. It was the first piece of comfort I'd had since my father's words sliced through my world. That tiny act of compassion lit something inside me. After finishing, I looked at the job notice in my wallet, a small cleaning position at a local car garage. It wasn't much, but it was a start. By the afternoon, I was standing in front of Grant's Auto Ego Repairs, my suitcase beside me. The garage was loud, the smell of oil thick in the air. A tall man with gray hair wiped his hands on a rag and gave me a curious look. "You here for the job?" "Yes, sir," I said quickly. He eyed me for a moment. "You look like you've never touched a wrench in your life." "I haven't," I admitted, "but I can clean, organize, and learn fast." He grunted. "Honesty. That's rare. Fine. You start today. Minimum wage, cash end of week. Don't quit after one day like the others." And just like that, I had a job, greasy, exhausting, and miles away from everything I'd ever known. The first week was brutal. My hands blistered from scrubbing floors and cleaning tools. I came home to my small rented room, a space barely big enough for a bed and a cracked mirror, and fell asleep with aching muscles. But every morning I reminded myself, I'm not worthless, I'm rebuilding. A month later, something unexpected happened. I was sweeping near the main bay when a young mechanic, maybe in his mid-20s, waved me over. "Hey, Emily, you're good with details, right? Can you hand me that tool set? The 8mm socket wrench?" I froze, not knowing which one he meant. He laughed kindly, showing me. "This one. Here, try holding it. You might like this kind of work." His name was Ethan, and over time, he became my first real friend. He didn't treat me like a burden or a mistake. He treated me like I belonged. When work was slow, he'd teach me about engines and car parts. I found myself fascinated by how something broken could be fixed if you knew what to look for. It felt poetic, like maybe I was learning how to rebuild myself too. One night, while we were closing up, Ethan said, "You've got a good mind for this stuff. Why are you wasting it cleaning up after us?" I shrugged, because it's the only job I could get. He smiled faintly, not ignore. "The boss has been watching you. He said you're more disciplined than half the mechanics here. You should ask him to train you properly." The idea terrified me, but it also thrilled me. The next morning I did. Mr. Grant looked surprised but impressed. "You want to learn? Fine, but no half-hearted effort. You stay after hours, you get your hands dirty. I'll teach you what I know." That night, I came home with oil on my hands and hope in my heart. I looked at my reflection in the cracked mirror and didn't see a lost daughter anymore. I saw a woman learning to fight for her life. Months passed. My confidence grew. Soon, customers started asking for me specifically because I took my time and cared about every detail. I began saving every penny, not for clothes or comfort, but for something bigger. Then one evening, as I scrolled through my phone, I saw a video about a new type of car technology, electric restoration kits. The idea fascinated me. I stayed up all night sketching designs, combining what I'd learned in the garage with ideas of my own. A dream began to form, a business that built hope from scraps, just like I had. The next morning I told Ethan, "One day, I'm going to start my own company. I'll build cars that are powerful and beautiful, and I'll name them after freedom, because that's what I found when they threw me away." He laughed. I believe you, Emily. You've got that fire. The following week I received a letter from home, my first since leaving. My mother's handwriting. It was short, "We hope you're doing well. Claire and Daniel are remodeling the house. Don't worry about us, no apology, no warmth, just a reminder that they'd moved on completely." For a moment my chest tightened. Then, I folded the letter and whispered, "You'll hear from me again, but next time it won't be a letter. It'll be something you can't ignore." As I placed the letter in my drawer, I smiled faintly. The pain hadn't vanished, but now it had purpose, because from that moment my revenge wasn't about hurting them. It was about becoming everything they told me I couldn't be. 2 years had passed since that night, the night my father erased me from his house and, unknowingly, set me free. I still remembered that cold evening vividly, but the pain had changed. It wasn't sharp anymore. It had become fuel, a constant fire that burned quietly beneath every step I took. The garage had become more than a workplace. It was my battlefield, my classroom, and my sanctuary. I had learned everything, from how to rebuild an engine block to diagnosing issues by sound alone. Ethan and Mr. Grant taught me everything they could, and when I wasn't working, I studied. Late nights watching videos, reading manuals, sketching designs. My walls were covered with notes and dreams. One evening, after everyone had gone home, I stayed behind, staring at an old wrecked car in the corner of the shop. A forgotten shell that everyone said was useless. "Maybe you're like me," I whispered to it, thrown away, but not done yet. That night, I began working on it, alone, secretly. I spent my savings on parts, scoured scrapyards for materials, and poured my soul into every bolt and wire. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and then, one late evening under flickering fluorescent light, the engine roared to life. The sound made me cry. It wasn't just a car running again, it was me, reborn from the wreckage of what my family had done. When Mr. Grant saw what I'd done, he couldn't stop smiling. "You fixed that thing by yourself? I told the others to scrap it months ago." I nodded, nervous. I just wanted to see if it could run again. He chuckled and handed me a cup of coffee. "Kid, that's more than fixing, that's creating. You've got something special here." It was then he said the words that changed my life. "Don't waste that spark here forever. Build something of your own. You've earned it." Those words echoed in my mind for weeks. Ethan helped me put together a small business plan. We started offering customized car restorations, using old models and modernizing them with electric kits. It was hard work, and at first clients barely noticed us. But slowly, word began to spread. People liked the girl mechanic with fire in her eyes. They liked that I didn't just repair, I reinvented. Our first official business was born out of that tiny garage. We called it Revive Motors. It was more than a company name, it was my truth, Revival. The first year was chaos, sleepless nights, failed engines, unpaid bills. But I didn't give up. Every failure became a lesson. Every setback became a spark for innovation. Then one day, a journalist from a local tech blog came by. She'd heard about the young woman who rebuilt a classic Mustang into an electric beauty by herself. She interviewed me in the garage, grease on my face, sparks flying in the background. I told her my story, not about my family, but about believing in yourself when no one else does. The article went viral. Within a week, investors were calling. A small startup fund offered me a grant to expand. Ethan and I worked day and night to open a larger workshop downtown. Soon, Revive Motors wasn't just a dream, it was real. Our custom electric cars began turning heads. Car enthusiasts, eco-brands, even celebrities wanted them. Each one carried a small engraving near the dashboard. Built from the broken, made to rise. That line became our brand slogan, and my personal oath. Despite the success, there were nights I couldn't sleep. Sometimes I dreamed of home, the creak of the old stairs, the laughter from the kitchen, my father's stern voice. I hadn't spoken to them since the letter. I told myself I didn't care, but deep down, part of me wanted them to see what I'd become. Not for validation, but for closure. One afternoon while reviewing new client contracts, Ethan came into my office. "You should check this out," he said, handing me his phone. The headline on the news made my heart jolt. Local businessman Daniel Hayes faces bankruptcy scandal. Investments collapsing. Daniel, my sister's husband. The article went on to describe how his company had lost millions in failed real estate ventures. Rumors said he'd dragged my father into it too, convincing him to mortgage part of their home for funding. For a long time I just stared at the screen. The man they'd chosen over me, the man who took my room. Now everything was falling apart for them. Ethan looked at me carefully. "You okay?" I smiled faintly. "Maybe it's time to go home." A few weeks later, I received a call from an unknown number. It was Claire. Her voice trembled. "Emily, Dad's not well. Things are bad. Can we meet?" I was silent for a long time. Then I said softly, "Sure, let's meet. Come to my office." When I hung up, I turned to the window of my glass-walled office overlooking the city, the same city I'd once walked through with a suitcase and broken heart. The skyline shimmered with lights, each one a reminder of how far I'd come. Tomorrow, they would walk through those glass doors. Tomorrow, the family that threw me out would see the woman who rose from the ashes, and for the first time in years, I was ready. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. My office was quiet, the kind of stillness that comes before something important. The city outside shimmered in the sunlight, unaware that today was the day my past would finally walk back into my life. I had imagined this moment 1,000 times, what I'd say, how I'd feel, but nothing could truly prepare me for it. I wasn't that broken girl anymore who had begged for love from people who thought she was expendable. I was someone else now, someone forged in fire and silence. At exactly 10 o'clock, the glass doors of my company opened, and I saw them. My father looked older, not just by age, but by the weight of defeat. His shoulders were slumped, his once commanding posture gone. My mother stood beside him, pale and quiet, eyes filled with a mix of regret and fear. Claire followed behind them, holding a folder, her face stiff but weary, and Daniel, the man who once smirked when I packed my bags, was now a shadow of himself, his confidence replaced with shame. They didn't recognize me at first. I was standing behind my desk, dressed sharply, the nameplate gleaming in front of me. Emily Carter, CEO, Revive Motors. When their eyes landed on it, the color drained from their faces. Claire was the first to speak. "Emily, this is your company?" I smiled faintly. "Yes. Welcome to Revive Motors. Please have a seat." They exchanged awkward glances before sitting down. The silence was thick, every second stretching like an accusation. My father cleared his throat. "We didn't know. We had no idea you'd survive," I interrupted softly. "Neither did you think I could, right?" He looked down, unable to meet my eyes. My mother tried to speak. "Emily, things have been hard. Daniel's business collapsed and your father—" I raised a hand. "I know, I read about it. The same Daniel you chose over me. The man you kicked me out for. The man who took my room while I slept on a park bench." Daniel swallowed hard, his voice small. "Emily, I never meant—" "Don't," I said quietly but firmly. "You did mean it. You all did." No one spoke. My father's jaw tightened. "We made mistakes," he said finally, "but family forgives. We're here to ask for help." The word help hung in the air like a ghost. I studied them one by one. The same people who once couldn't find room for me now sat across from me, desperate for the space I created on my own. I thought of the nights I went hungry, the mornings I worked through tears, the humiliation of being unwanted. And then I thought of how far I'd come. "I remember the night you told me there wasn't room for me," I said quietly. "Do you remember what you said, Dad? You looked me in the eyes and told me to pack my things because Daniel needed my room. You didn't even ask where I'd go. You just decided I was unnecessary." He said nothing. My mother dabbed her eyes with a tissue. Claire looked down at her hands. "Now," I continued, "you're sitting here in my office asking me for help, in my space. Do you see the irony?" There was no anger in my voice anymore, only calm, a calm that came from finally being free. My father's voice trembled. "Emily, please, you're our daughter." I smiled, not cruelly but with a quiet strength. "I was your daughter then too. You just forgot. For a moment, none of them could speak. The ticking clock filled the silence. Then I leaned back in my chair and said, "I'll help you, but not out of pity, out of choice. You'll sign over the property you mortgaged to Daniel's company. I'll buy it, restore it, and make it part of Revive's expansion. You'll have enough to start over. After that, we're even." Claire's eyes widened. "You'd do that for us?" "I'm not doing it for you," I said softly. "I'm doing it for the girl you abandoned. She deserves closure." Daniel nodded weakly, grateful for mercy he didn't deserve. My father didn't respond. He just looked at me, the same way he did years ago. But this time, his eyes weren't full of disappointment. They were full of shame. When they left, I stood by the window, watching their figures fade into the sunlight. My chest felt lighter, not because I had punished them, but because I had finally stopped needing them to see my worth. Ethan walked in a few minutes later, holding a folder. "You good?" I turned to him and smiled. "Better than ever." He grinned. "So, that was the family?" "Yeah," I said quietly. "The same family that said they had no room for me." "And now?" I looked around my office. The glass walls, the humming energy of the factory below, the company I built from nothing. "Now," I said, "I have room for everything. Except regret." Outside, the sound of engines echoed. The sound of machines I had built, powered by resilience and faith. The world had tried to break me, but instead, it had rebuilt me stronger. As I stood there, the memory of that cold night no longer hurt. It was just a story, the beginning of one life and the end of another. They had thrown me out into the dark, but I had found my light. And this time, it was mine to keep.